Yo, Republicans suck.
Libtard!
I ain't dating no fake news broad.
You drive a gas guzzler?
Vote blue if you want to be my boo. Ah, the sounds of young love. Or not so much. In the US, we now live in a culture where people are feeling more and more defined by their political views, and society is pushing people even more to decide what side of the aisle you're on and to stay far away from somebody who disagrees with you. So, can you date someone with different political views? Is this an opposites attract type thing, or is that just a recipe for World War III? Today, I want to look at a few questions you can answer to determine if dating someone with different political views is going to work for you or not. And then what I want to do is I want to look at a few tips to help you succeed if you do decide to date someone from the other side of the aisle. Let's get into it. Question number 1. Are politics a moral issue for you? For a lot of singles, politics are a government thing, and while they agree and disagree with some issues, that's generally where it stops. It may be important to them, but it's not something that really digs into their moral fiber. But for a growing number of singles, politics is becoming a moral issue. They find the views and the actions of the other party to be morally reprehensible. Whether it be their stance on abortion or their stance on immigration or how they choose to treat the less fortunate or any other issue that really digs into their moral being. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No. You can have your viewpoints. You're allowed to have different viewpoints, and you're allowed to have things that are more or less important to you. But if politics is something that is a moral issue to you, then dating someone on the other side of the aisle is probably not going to be very productive. However, if it's not something that really digs into who you are, it is possible for you to work with somebody and to date somebody on the other side of the political aisle. Question number 2. How important in general are politics to you? For a lot of single men and women, politics is something that happens every 2 years. They get jazzed up for it around election time and then just kind of go with the flow after that. For other people, politics is life. And if you're somebody who falls into that category, then obviously politics is going to permeate into other aspects of your life, including your dating life. Now, again, is there anything wrong with where you stand on how important politics is? Absolutely not. But you need to know where you stand because that will help you to determine whether or not you can date someone from the other side of the aisle. Up until about a few years ago, I would say that more people fell into the go with the flow category where they get jazzed up around election time and then just kind of fall back into their routine until 2 years later in the next election cycle. But over the past couple years, we've actually seen a dramatic shift of more people taking politics way more seriously and it being way more important to their life. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with falling into either one of those two camps. You just need to know which one you are part of because if politics is super important to you, it's going to permeate into the rest of your life, into your dating life, and it's not going to work as well with people that are on the other side of the aisle. And this brings me to a much, much more important point. Relationships take two people. And what that means here is maybe politics isn't that important to you or it's not something that really drives your life. But if the person you're talking to, it is something that drives who they are and really is a building block of their character, well, then it's not going to work out. It's one of those things where you're both going to need to be on the same page here for this to make sense. Question number 3. How far apart are your political views and the political views of the person you're dating? Again, we live in a world where people are almost being forced to choose one side of the aisle or the other. And while I very strongly disagree with that being a practice, it really is the way of the world. It's either CNN or you're Fox or you're a liberal, racist, tree-hugging communist who wants to see the world burn. I tried to hit as many buzzwords there as possible just for effect. But the point I'm trying to make is this, is that even though I disagree with people being forced to choose one side of the aisle or the other, it's something that's happening. And so what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to find out where the person you're dating stands on these political issues. How do you go about doing that? You ask. You have an adult conversation. There's this old adage that talking about religion, politics, and money are big no-nos on dates. And the reason for that is because they are divisive issues. And while I agree they might not be best for like a first date, pretty early on in the dating cycle, these are things you need to talk about. You need to figure out where the other person stands. Otherwise, you might be committing a lot of time and a lot of your resources to a relationship that's just not going to work. If you differ on major issues, it's less likely that things are going to work out. But if in this conversation you find out that, hey, you disagree on some smaller issues, but you kind of have the same general idea of what's important or where you stand on issues that are important to you, then there's a good chance it's going to work out. But you're never going to figure any of this out unless you have a conversation about it. So let's say you answer these questions and you decide that you do want to try and make it work with somebody who you differ with on political views. First of all, kudos to you for not being scared of a little disagreement. I think it's something that's going to make the world a much better place. Second of all, let's take a look at some tips that I think are going to help you to succeed a little bit more in this relationship. Tip number 1, don't ignore it and don't pretend that it doesn't exist. If you ignore the elephant in the room, pun intended, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure, right? What you want to do is you want to talk about the issues, talk about what's important to you, be honest. Don't worry about hurting someone's feelings or stepping on someone's toes. This is a time to sit down and really hash things out, because if you push it off or you're not honest, you're going to end up 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years into the relationship, and then you're going to realize that there are some really big issues that you might not be able to work through. Tip number 2, after you have this initial conversation and you lay everything out and you find out how to move forward on common ground, there's no reason to keep bringing it up over and over again. There's a tendency with people when they disagree on something to not be able to put it to rest, but this is a situation where you're really going to want to be mature and be able to do that, because if you keep bringing it up and you keep having just this discussion every single day, it's going to cause problems. There's nothing wrong with talking politics and having disagreements and discussions with somebody that you're growing to love and to care about, but you don't want to be having this knockdown, drag-out conversation every single day, because it's going to be daunting, it's going to wear on both of you, and it's going to be negative for the relationship. Tip number 3, don't go into the relationship thinking that you're going to be able to change their viewpoint on anything. A lot of times we've seen people who say, hey, I'm totally cool with where you stand on it. It's not that big of an issue to me. But in the back of their mind, what they're thinking is, give me a few weeks, few months, even a year, whatever. I'm going to change their viewpoint on this. And what ends up happening is they don't change their viewpoint on it because they were honest about where they stand, but you weren't honest about where you stand. And you end up running into a huge problem. Again, be honest about where you stand. And if you're not okay with where they stand on something and it's going to be a deal breaker, share that, right? It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough to end that relationship. But just think about how much harder that would be 6, 12 months down the road when you find out that they're not going to change their mind on it, but you've already invested so much time, emotion, and resources. Before I get to the final and arguably the most important thing that I want to share, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this content, you're having a good time, you're learning something from this, it would really help us out a lot if you'd hit that like button, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. We're constantly putting out some great content, and that sort of support from you helps us to continue doing that. The last thing I want to share is an opinion of mine, and I think it's one that's really important. Politics is not everything. There is way more to life, there's way more to do, and there's way more that makes up who a person is. I'm not saying politics is not important. I think it is extremely important, but it's not everything. And I think that if we as a society and as single men and women can start to embrace that, I think it's going to make the dating community a whole lot better, and it's going to make your experiences in life a whole lot better. Well, thanks again, guys, for spending some time with me. My name's Jason with healthyframework.com. Again, if you enjoyed this content, thumbs up, subscribe button helps us out a lot, and it allows you to see all the brand new content we're going to be sending out. Thanks again. Have a great day.